A narcissist always believes that betraying you is nothing more than a small move on the chessboard, a tactic to keep control, a way to remind you that you need them more than they need you. They think you'll hurt for a moment and then come back, try to explain, try to hold on, try to prove your worth, just like every time before. But what they never understand is this: the very moment they betray you becomes the breaking point in their already fragile psychological structure. Carl Jung wrote that any action misaligned with the true self, that inner core of honesty, becomes the doorway through which the shadow rises. And betraying someone genuine, like you, is precisely the moment when their shadow slips out of their control, shattering the delicate balance they maintain with their mask, their persona. What destroys them is not that you leave, but that they strike the exact self-destruct point of their own ego. They betray the one person who ever saw the good in them, and in doing so they destroy their last chance to preserve even a minimal sense of inner integrity. When you go silent, when you withdraw your energy, when you no longer get pulled into the cycle of explaining, forgiving, trying that they rely on to feed their ego, they have nothing left to hold on to. A self that only exists through the reactions and emotions of others begins to shake the moment the supply is gone. The collapse doesn't happen instantly, but it is inevitable. They lose control, lose attention, lose the perfect image they work so hard to construct. And most importantly, they are forced to face the inner emptiness you once softened with your kindness. They thought they were destroying you, but in reality they destroyed the psychological defense system that allowed them to function. And from the moment you walk away in calm silence, without arguing, without clinging, without needing their validation, the wheel of psychological karma begins to turn. It pushes them into the disintegration process Jung called the collapse of the persona and the uprising of the shadow, the descent from which they no longer have the strength to escape. From Carl Jung's perspective, a narcissist's betrayal is never an impulsive act or a momentary lapse. It is the inevitable consequence of an ego that has become disconnected from its own soul. A narcissist lives in a constant inner war. The persona, the perfect mask they show to the world, must continually suppress the shadow, the part filled with shame, insecurity, fear, and emptiness. When they encounter someone genuine like you, someone who loves, feels, and gives without calculation, you unintentionally become the mirror that exposes the falseness within them. A narcissist does not fear losing you, they fear seeing themselves reflected in you. And betrayal becomes their way of shattering that mirror. They are beauty and corruption, a demon and a mirror. They beat you. But Jung pointed out that anyone who breaks the mirror of truth inevitably shatters the image inside themselves as well. Otto Kernberg, one of the leading researchers on narcissism, wrote that people with a narcissistic personality organization use betrayal, deception, and devaluation as defense mechanisms to avoid facing their own inner helplessness. According to Kernberg, betrayal is not intended to hurt you. It is intended to keep their distorted ego from collapsing. But here lies the paradox. The very act meant to protect their fragile self ends up cracking it even faster. Heinz Kohut, the father of self-psychology, described a painful truth. When a narcissist betrays the self-object they rely on to feel valuable, they sever the very source that nourishes their sense of self. In other words, when they betray the one who loved them sincerely, they betray the foundation that keeps them emotionally alive. You were that self-object, the source of reflection, understanding, and connection they could never generate from within themselves. So when they hurt you, they don't just break trust, they break the only emotional structure that helped them feel real. This is why the betrayal becomes a stab that turns back onto them. It removes the last anchor keeping them from sinking into their inner void. At the emotional core, their betrayal stems from the terror of being seen, and seen in their smallness, their insecurity, their worthlessness, all the things they have spent a lifetime hiding. The more authentic you are, the more they panic. The more you love with your heart, the more threatened they feel. A narcissist betrays not because you are not good enough, but because you are too real for their level of psychological tolerance. And in the moment they betray you, they sever the only thread connecting them to truth, healing, and the possibility of growth. For you, it is pain. For them, it is the beginning of internal decay. A slow, deep, irreversible process Jung described perfectly. Whatever is denied will return to devour the soul of the denier. A narcissist betrays you under a very specific delusion. They genuinely believe they can harm you without ever paying a price. In their mind, you always come back. You always forgive. You always try one more time. Your kindness is interpreted as dependence. Your loyalty is mistaken for naivete. Your silence is labeled weakness. They live in a psychological blind spot, one in which they see only their own immediate advantage and cannot imagine long-term consequences. Jung called this the inflated ego delusion. An ego swollen by the persona, so shielded from truth that it cannot see reality anymore. This delusion convinces them that betraying you is their right, not an act capable of destroying them. Ehrenberg explained that narcissists hold a dangerous core belief. They assume those who care about them will never leave, no matter what they do. This is object constancy failure, the inability to grasp that other people have their own inner emotional world, meaning they don't see you as a person, but as an object, there to absorb, endure, and contain their insecurity. And because they see you as an object, they believe you won't break, but they don't realize that this very disrespect is the first step toward their downfall. Kohut described another illusion. Narcissists believe they can replace you at any moment. In their psychological world, one self-object lost simply means another will appear. They believe there are countless people ready to pour into their lives, love them, adore them, and tolerate them. To them, betraying you is merely switching sources of supply, like replacing a battery in the flashlight they are holding. But what they do not know is this: you were never their supply. You were the mirror that made them feel real. And that mirror cannot be replaced. At a deep emotional level, their illusion is fed by three psychological mechanisms. Denial, they deny that you can leave. Rejection, they blame you for their insecurity and use that as justification for betrayal. Moral disengagement, they convince themselves that you deserved it because you were too sensitive or didn't understand them. This is why they can betray without feeling guilt in the moment. But repressed emotions always return. And when they do, they punish the narcissist tenfold. The narcissist's greatest illusion is the belief that they are winning when you hurt. They think they are stronger when you are silent. They think your effort to save the relationship means you are afraid to lose them. They never understand that your patience was not fear. Your kindness was not weakness, and the only thing keeping you there was your belief that love could heal. Once that belief dies, you no longer have a reason to stay, but the narcissist cannot perceive this. In their mind, you leave not because of them, but because you are emotional, overreacting, or trying to teach them a lesson. They cannot recognize the truth. You walked away because they destroyed their final chance. When a narcissist betrays you, they have no idea that this very action becomes the spark that ignites one of the most dangerous psychological processes in Carl Jung's system, shadow collapse. The moment when the part of themselves they have always tried to bury begins to rise, take over the ego, crack the persona, and gradually cause their entire psychological structure to decay from within. In this relationship, you were the only point of balance, the last hint of humanity keeping them from falling into inner chaos. Not because you were saving them, but because your authentic, kind, and stable presence created a natural counterweight that allowed them to maintain the illusion of being normal. When they betray you, they believe they are escaping responsibility, escaping the kindness that makes them uncomfortable, escaping the mirror that exposes their emptiness. But in truth, they are cutting the very anchor, preventing their shadow from devouring them. Jung taught that the persona, the mask they use to charm, manipulate, and appear powerful, can only survive if someone believes in it. You were one of the last people who still believe in that mask. When you leave because of betrayal, their persona loses its source of nourishment and begins to crack. The lies have no one to stabilize them. The roles have no audience. The false identity has no scaffolding. This is the moment the shadow, the repressed part, filled with shame, fear, and insufficiency, begins to flood upward. At the psychoanalytic level, they enter a state of ego fragmentation. The ego splits into scattered pieces. One part tries to maintain the mask, another panics, another erupts in rage, another sinks into shame. Shadow collapse happens when they no longer have the strength to hold these pieces together. Betraying you triggers an internal shock that knocks out the last support beam, causing the cracks they once hid so carefully to spread. And in the moment you go silent, walk away, and stop orbiting around them, they don't just lose you, they lose their entire system of self-regulation. Everything you once did, listening, soothing, stabilizing their emotions, reflecting truth back to them, once kept their persona standing. When that stabilizing force disappears, they enter predictable states: emotional chaos, fear of abandonment, frantic pursuit of new supply, projections of anger, inflated victimhood, or increased cruelty. All are signs of the shadow rising. Jung described shadow collapse as the soul being possessed by its lowest part. This is precisely what the narcissist experiences after betraying you. They think they have freed themselves from someone too sensitive, too loving, or too good. But what they actually set free is their own darkness. And now there is no one left to balance it, no one to make them feel real, no one to admire them without performance. The collapse does not happen overnight. It unfolds like slow internal corrosion. Sleepless nights, obsessive thoughts about your calmness, monitoring you from a distance, feeling insecure when they see you healing, blaming you and then feeling guilty, desperately chasing new supply that never fills the void. Because shadow collapse is something no new partner, no new relationship, and no fresh source of supply can repair. Your betrayal did not destroy you. It destroyed the psychological scaffolding they were barely holding together. You lose someone unworthy, they lose the only person who ever kept them from their own darkness. A narcissist does not collapse at the moment they betray you. They collapse the moment you withdraw your energy. Many people misunderstand no contact, silence, or walking away as self-defense. But for a narcissist, it is a structural impact event, forcing them to confront the truth they have run from all their life. They cannot self-regulate emotionally. They cannot exist without supply. They cannot maintain their persona without borrowing someone else's energy. When you go silent, they don't just lose you. They lose the air they breathe. In Jungian psychology, psychic energy, libido, never disappears. It only redirects. When you withdraw your energy, your care, understanding, attention, emotional responses, the entire flow of libido that once fed them is suddenly cut off. And when that stream stops, their ego begins to shrivel, dry out, and crack apart. This is what Jung called ego deflation. The collapse of an ego that was inflated far beyond its real capacity. But for a narcissist, this deflation is not sadness, it is existential panic. A narcissist functions like a closed system that uses other people as emotional conduits. When you withdraw your energy, the system loses pressure, causing chain collapse. They begin to cycle through predictable phases: sudden inner instability, emptiness, anxiety, confusion without knowing why, panic-driven search for new supply, jumping into relationships to recreate a sense of control, negative projection, blaming you, others, or circumstances to avoid facing themselves, self-protect breakdown. The persona cracks, leaving them feeling unreal, weak, or exposed. Reverse obsession, watching you, checking on you, talking about you, mentioning you to others, even while pretending indifference. Emotional collapse, swinging between rage, numbness, arrogance, fear, desperation. When you withdraw your energy, they're forced to face their core fear, the fear of being forgotten. Heinz Kohut noted that abandonment by a self-object, someone who once provided essential positive reflection, creates fragmentation, anxiety, the terror of the self breaking apart. You were that self object. When you stop responding, stop explaining, stop healing them, they feel as if they are disappearing from their own skin. That is why they sometimes try to return, sometimes explode, sometimes invent stories, sometimes go silent. Each behavior is a desperate attempt to reclaim the energy you took back. Jung called this the return of the repressed, the resurgence of everything they buried: shame, weakness, emptiness, fear of abandonment. Your silence unmasks them. Your withdrawal exposes the parts they've denied for a lifetime. They cannot endure your silence, not because they love you, but because your silence forces them to confront a terrifying truth. There is no one left to hold them together. They begin to recognize a painful reality. Your betrayal didn't destroy you, it destroyed them. You heal in silence. They unravel in the darkness they created. This is the stage where the collapse becomes irreversible. Once you withdraw your energy, they can never retrieve the old version of you. And they can never return to the old version of themselves. This loss sends them into a downward spiral where every attempt to recreate control fails because they have lost the only person who ever made them feel enough, even for a moment. The consequences of betrayal do not appear immediately, but they unfold according to a deeply precise psychological logic. The genuine person recovers, while the narcissist decays. Jung once said, "A soul that lives in truth will always find its way, but a soul that avoids truth will become lost within itself." This describes exactly the final trajectory of you and of them. When you are betrayed, you hurt, you collapse, but you possess the inner capacity to heal because you live authentically. You endure sleepless nights, days of confusion, moments of breaking, but eventually you reach the deeper layers of your being, where regeneration, learning, and recovery reside. Your pain becomes the catalyst that brings you back to the self, the authentic core Jung believed to be the center of individuation. You do not simply heal, you grow, you strengthen, you awaken. Your pain becomes wisdom, and the silence you choose becomes a sacred boundary protecting your soul. Meanwhile, for the narcissist, the process moves in the opposite direction. When they betray you, they believe they are winning. But the moment you withdraw your energy, cut off supply, and stop restoring them, they fall into what Kernberg calls the dead inner core, a hollow, lifeless psychological space where love, empathy, and genuine connection do not exist. Only fragments of a shattered ego remain. They try to fill the void with new lovers, new excitement, new supply, but nothing replaces you, because you were never someone they used. You were the person who made them feel real. Once they lose that reflection, they lose more than a relationship. They lose the emotional stability they once borrowed from you. This is when they begin spiraling into long-term consequences. They meet new people but feel no real connection because their shadow has risen too strongly. They try to rebuild their persona, but no one fully believes it anymore because the cracks are visible. They chase attention, but the more they receive, the emptier they feel. They use anger to regain control, only to be burned by their own rage. Bohut called this the self-fragmentation chronicle, a life breaking apart piece by piece. Every failed relationship, every wound they cause, every moment of loneliness, all consequences of the moment they betrayed the only source of light that ever helped them feel alive. Meanwhile, you grow stronger. You learn to love yourself, to choose yourself, to step out of the savior role. You become attractive in ways they never understood. Peace replaces chaos, self-respect replaces begging, clarity replaces illusion. You begin attracting better things, better people, and a more grounded life. While you rise, they decline, for one simple reason. You move closer to the self, they sink deeper into the shadow. Your growth is light, their collapse is darkness. And light always finds a path, while darkness expands only when no one is looking at it. They realize too late that what they lost was not just a relationship, but their only chance to become a better version of themselves. The cost of betraying an authentic soul is always the collapse of the betrayer. And you, without revenge, without proving anything, simply by living in your truth, become the lasting reminder of that consequence. Betrayal hurt you, but that very pain became the catalyst that opened a completely new version of you. A version the narcissist never imagined you could become. Jung called this phase the rebirth of consciousness, the stage where a person not only heals from trauma, but rises into a higher plane of self-understanding. Wiest asked, when you withdraw your energy, when you stop trying to fix the unfixable, when you stop fighting for a relationship only you were keeping alive, you begin returning to yourself. Not through fear, but through truth. At first, that truth is painful, but soon it becomes light. You begin to see that you did not fail, you were freed. You were not abandoned, you were returned to your own freedom. You did not lose them, you regained yourself. As you step out of the narcissistic vortex, you start to feel your body again, your emotions again, your intuition again. All the things they blurred through manipulation, gaslighting, and emotional loops. You learn to rise from wounds. You learn to distinguish real love from disguised exploitation. You learn that your kindness is not a tool for others to use. You learn that you deserve love without conditions, without control, without deception. And from that learning, a new layer of awareness forms. Strong, awake, luminous. This is the self in the Jungian psyche. The core of being that narcissists never reach because they fear facing themselves. When you are reborn, your energy changes. You no longer react as before, no longer cling, no longer need to prove yourself. Your new calm terrifies them. Your new self-respect is something they cannot dominate. And your new silence makes them feel smaller than ever. You step into a deeper version of yourself, one where you choose who enters your life. That choice once belonged to them. Now it belongs entirely to you. What frightens the narcissist most is not that you left, it is that you became someone they are no longer worthy of returning to. The more you heal, the more they wither. The stronger you become, the more they fear. The more peaceful you become, the more they feel the chaos inside themselves. Because you did not just lose the wound, you rediscovered your essence. You did not just get back up, you rose as a more complete, clearer, stronger version of yourself. And that forces them to confront a truth they never dare admit. They did not just lose you, they lost their only chance to ever feel a love that was real. Jung had a quote for this exact moment. The one who keeps their soul after walking through darkness is the one who is truly strong. And that is you. You are not the light they took for granted. You are the light they never had the strength to hold. You did not just rise, you rose into someone they will never reach, no matter how many souls they search through. The cruelest irony of a narcissist's downfall is that they always realize everything too late. Not when you cry, not when you hurt, not when you beg for truth, but at the very moment you no longer feel sad. That is when they panic. Jung said that darkness does not know it is darkness until the light disappears. You were that light. And only when you leave their life completely, without love, without anger, without reaction, do they finally face the terrifying truth. They have lost forever what they were never mature enough to keep. Here is the full, precise, elegant English translation. Faithful to every psychological, emotional, and Jungian nuance of your original text. This stage is known in psychoanalytic theory as late-stage narcissistic collapse, a delayed implosion in which their entire life begins to reflect back at them like a shattered mirror. They begin to experience the consequences on 3 levels. 1. The cognitive level. They finally understand you are not coming back. This is the most painful moment for them. They believed your silence was a test, a tactic to make them jealous, or a punishment. But when you are no longer sad, no longer messaging, no longer finding excuses to connect, they are forced to confront the truth. You have stepped out of their emotional vortex. You are no longer drawn into their subtle games. You are no longer the endless energy source they could exploit. You have moved into a space they no longer have the right to enter. 2. The emotional level. They are swallowed by the emptiness you once filled. When you leave, what remains inside them is not anger. It is emptiness. The same emptiness they once tried to dump onto you, now returning doubled. This is when they most clearly feel what Kernberg called the dead inner core, a lifeless psychic zone with no vitality, no real affection, no genuine connection. They try to fill it with new people, new relationships, new excitement, but nothing recreates the unique energy you once gave. The novelty thrills them for a few days, then everything collapses back into coldness and isolation. They begin to realize the problem was never you. The problem is inside them. 3. The soul level. They are haunted by a version of you they can never have again. Jung called this the hunting archetype, the lingering image of what they could have become, but destroyed with their own hands. You once believed in them, saw the good they hid from themselves, were patient, healing, loving in ways they never deserved. And now, when they face the strong, calm, sovereign version of you, they do not just feel regret. They feel self-hatred. They will never admit it, but deep inside, they know. They are no longer worthy, deep enough, or authentic enough to re-enter your life. And that truth is irreversible. When they realize they destroy the only thing that ever made them feel real, their persona collapses completely. The lies they used to believe in no longer work. The performances they once mastered now look absurd. The sources of supply they once attracted now feel dull and empty. They realize they can replace anyone except you. This is the ultimate consequence a narcissist never anticipates. They did not lose someone who loved them. They lost the only person who ever illuminated the human part of them. And the most painful part is that they lose you at the exact moment you no longer need them. Not because you are trying to prove anything, but because you have become a self they are no longer worthy to touch. In the end, this journey is no longer about the narcissist. It is about you, your soul, after walking through darkness, the maturity you gained through your own suffering. The narcissist believed betrayal would break you, that their absence would weaken you, that they could return whenever they wished. But they never understood that the moment they hurt you became the very material from which your awakening was built. They could only break you when you did not yet know who you were, able to remember your worth. They no longer held any power. Jung said, "What we accept transforms us. What we refuse imprisons us." You have accepted the truth. The truth that love cannot save someone who refuses to be saved. That a beautiful heart is not responsible for fixing a distorted soul. That silence sometimes is the highest form of prayer for yourself. Through that acceptance, you walked out of the darkness they still remain trapped in. While you are reborn, the narcissist decays. Not because you punish them, but because they planted within themselves the very seeds of their inner destruction. Lies, cowardice, and the betrayal of the only person who was ever genuine with them. You do not need to do anything. Life will teach them what they tried to escape. You only need to keep walking, keep healing, keep becoming the version of yourself that pain shaped, not to break you, but to lift you. Every step you take away from them is another step. They fall deeper into the emptiness they once poured into you. This is not karma, this is cycle. When you lose a beautiful soul, you lose the chance to become a better human. You do not need to look back. You do not need to ask why they did it. You do not need to blame yourself. You do not need to prove your worth, because the truth is, you were always worthy. They simply lacked the depth to see it. And now, having walked through the darkness, having risen from the ruins, having reclaimed the voice of your soul, you are no longer on a level of energy they can reach. You no longer play their game. You have rewritten the rules of your own existence. Remember this. The peace you have now is something they will search for all their life and never find. Not because you are better, but because you faced the truth. And they ran from it. You chose healing. They chose illusion. You chose light. They chose shadows. And light, in the end, always wins. You do not need revenge. You only need to live in your truth. And that truth alone is enough to make them understand the cost of betraying a genuine heart. You did not just survive. You transcended. You became someone they will never reach. And from here on, your life is no longer their story. It is your story. The story of finding yourself. The story of the freedom you claimed with your own courage. Keep walking. Keep shining. Keep standing strong. And let them face the darkness they created. As for you, you have found your way home.